Today I will be reviewing this fountain pen from AliExpress, and this was only $2, and it did come with a converter that, as you'll see later, doesn't fit, and it came with a eyedropper as well. So all of these things for $2, I would say that's a pretty good price. And I will be using the Karkos Turquoise ink in this video as well. As you can see, it's a completely clear plastic fountain pen, and the first issue, because it's very obvious, is that this inner cap that it has is not removable. It's screwed in, and some ink did leak in between, so I wasn't able to clean that out. But I'm sure if you just soaked it in a cup or something like that, it would be able to come right out. It's just because I cleaned this pen right before filming this. So the feed is completely clear as well, which I think is a very nice touch for this all clear pen. And it is meant to be an eyedropper filled fountain pen. And that's why I bought it, because I think those demonstrator pens are very gorgeous, especially when they're an eyedropper. So it did come with this converter. It's quite cheap. It feels kind of flimsy, like it might just break at any second. But I actually haven't really used it, so I can't say much about it because, as I said, I bought this to be an eyedropper converter. It seems to be working all right. It actually fits, which is good. But then it doesn't actually fit into the barrel. So they sent you a converter, but the converter doesn't actually work with the pen. So that's a bummer. But I guess normally people do use this as an eyedropper fill anyway. So that might not be too much of a problem. I'm not sure if this is in standard international or not. So maybe there might be other pens that you have or things like that that this converter can be used for. This pen was actually $2 shipped, so a very inexpensive pen. This also came with a pipette, just a very cheap plastic pipette that also came with it. So I think this pen, a pipette, and a converter all for $2, that's a pretty sweet deal. But we'll talk about how this pen actually writes in a second after I fill it up with this ink. This is the Karkos Turquoise ink. I'm sure some people have seen it. It's also sold on eBay and Amazon as well. I can't say anything for any of the other colors that they have, but this color actually shades quite a lot, at least in a little bit wetter and bigger of a fountain pen nib. I will do a writing sample with this pen just to show you how it works, but I'm not so sure if the shading will show up on here. But I will fill this pen up and I'll be right back. Something I forgot to mention is I've had this pen inked up consistently for the past 2 months or so, and as you can see from the earlier clips, there was no staining, which is a big plus when you're eyedropper filling pens like this. And as you can see, I've basically used up all of this ink. This is 30 milliliters and it was around $3 for this ink. I think honestly you can find it cheaper on eBay than I bought it for on AliExpress, so keep that in mind. Okay, so let me just do a little writing sample with this pen just so that you can see how it performs. I have been using this pen for a while now, and as I've said before, I write a lot, so while I've been writing with this pen, I found that the feed can sometimes not keep up with the pen, and that's just from regular writing. It's quite a dry writer as well, as you can see here, and it dries up while you're writing as well if you write fast and a lot. And as you can hear from me writing as well, it is quite scratchy. I wouldn't say it's necessarily unpleasant to write with, but the pen is a little grippy. It's almost like you're writing on plastic, I would say. There is scratchiness, as you can hear, but also it doesn't flow across the paper like most fountain pens, or better fountain pens. As you can hear, it's very scratchy, and this is after I've written with it quite a lot over a period of time. It's been smoothed out by me writing with it quite a lot, but it still is quite scratchy. And this is a fine, since I forgot to say that. And they do also offer extra fine. And I've seen this over Amazon as well, actually. All you have to do is just type in clear fountain pen, eyedropper fountain pen, something like that, and you should definitely have no problem finding it. The feed looks pretty good when you eyedropper fill it. It's really cool that it shows up the color that it is. As you can see, there's no spreading of the tines. You're not going to get any line variation out of this pen. The tines are actually very close together and they don't seem to want to open. You can reverse write with this, which is pretty cool. For an extra fine line, it is quite scratchy, but it is definitely doable. The nib is very, very flat. It kind of just seems like it was punched out of a piece of metal and then just bent around the feed, which is how a lot of cheaper fountain pens are. I definitely don't think this is the greatest writing experience. I also don't think it's awful, but I definitely wouldn't recommend this pen at all. There are a lot of Chinese pens that work a lot better. They write a lot smoother, a lot wetter, and I think you just probably have a lot safer bet going with a branded fountain pen rather than just a random one, because this was not branded. Go with a brand like Jinhao or Wing Sung. You can also find those for around $5 or less on AliExpress and eBay, but I have to say I bought this for the aesthetics and it didn't let me down on that front. It is quite a pretty pen to look at, and the writing isn't awful. Also, there is an O-ring right here that keeps the ink from falling out or spilling out. So I have never had a problem with ink spillage, and I know some of the Chinese fountain pen feeds can actually, while you're writing, it can kind of glop out the ink on the page. I've never had an issue with that. With this pen, even when I shake it like this, obviously not like incredibly vigorously, but if I kind of tap it just to like try to get the ink out or prime the feed like that, I've never had an issue with ink glopping out onto the page. So overall, it's not an awful pen, but also I feel like most of the times when you're going for a fountain pen, it's for the writing experience, and I definitely don't think this nib is the best. As I said, it's scratchy, it doesn't flow across the page very well, it's kind of grippy, it kind of feels like you're writing with plastic, but it's also manageable. I wouldn't say it's awful to write with. I definitely will still write with this since I have it. But yeah, that's this fountain pen. And as you can see, this is the ink color. You couldn't see much of the shading since it is such a fine nib and it's such a dry nib, but I promise you it's there. And in some other videos, I have shown this ink. If you want to see the properties of this ink more, you can go visit my other videos. So that was a review of this pen. I definitely am going to continue using it. It's not an awful writing experience. It's still better than most ballpoint pens, I would say. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going out and buying this pen unless you want something very inexpensive that you aren't afraid to lose. But yeah, that is the AliExpress fountain pen and ink. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Thanks, have a great day.